Hey, leaders, have you ever struggled with stepping into those tough conversations? Do you find it hard to mediate conflicts and hold your team accountable? Well, we've got just the thing for you, a free resource called How to Step into the Hard Conversations Using the ACDC Method. Leaders must address the hard stuff. That's part of the job. But let's face it, not everyone has the skills to navigate these tricky dialogues effectively. And that's where the ACDC method comes in. This powerful approach helps leaders like you resolve conflicts with a focus not just on the resolution, but on reconciliation and a clear path forward. Most of the work happens before you even step foot in front of the other person. With the ACDC method, you'll learn to accept the challenge, check your ego, decide the real issue, and converse effectively. Whether you're dealing with a minor disagreement or a major incident, this method is your go-to guide. So ready to transform your leadership and tackle those tough conversations head on? Download How to Step into the Hard Conversations using the ACDC method for free. Visit leadershipontherocks.com/conflict and start leading with confidence and clarity. Again, make sure to download our free resource and turn conflict into a constructive conversation. Visit leadershipontherocks.com/conflict now.
So let me say what I think values are. Number one, they're an individual choice. You choose the ones you like. And then the key point, they're malleable over time.
I got to sit with that one for a second.
Change those values, which means that the ethical base you operate out of is a moving target.
Yeah, situational ethics right there.
Exactly.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with leader and author Sig Berg about how embracing virtuous leadership will foster success and deliver consistent, superior results within your team and organization. Sig Berg is the author of The Virtue Proposition, as well as chairman and founder of the Severn Leadership Group in Annapolis, Maryland, which for over a decade has influenced the character of leadership across a variety of industries, government, and the armed forces, which, as Berg has done his whole career. He is a nuclear submarine commander in the U.S. Navy and held executive and educational positions in the nuclear industry. Berg has a Master of Divinity degree from Trinity Lutheran Seminary and has served as a church pastor. He's also taken part in the Advanced Management program from Harvard Business School. The mission of the Severn Leadership Group is to develop and support leaders and teams to be agents of transformation. They envision a better world through virtuous leadership. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Mr. Berg. So happy to have you.
Great to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Oh, man. Well, let me tell you, I've been reading your book, The Virtue Proposition, 5 virtues that's going to transform leadership, team performance, and you. And the way I read that is, and me, transform me.
That's right.
And so, yeah. And you mentioned in leadership that leadership is frequently thought of as like a destination, like you've arrived, you got the title, the corner office, but you say it's actually a departure. And I love that because I think it's so true. But will you explain to us what you mean when you say leadership is actually a departure?
Well, because it's a departure in the sense that it's the beginning of a journey that you'll have probably for your entire life. And it's never arriving because you're always looking to grow, to get better, to serve other people, to say no when you need to say no. And it's about developing relationships with people. And leadership is not about things, but it's about people. And so it's always a departure in the sense that you grow, you learn, you serve, and the challenges that come with it.
Man, everything you just said makes me think about mindset. We've got to have that leadership mindset of it's a constant process, growth mindset. We're always learning and growing and learning from situations to apply it to the next one. So I love that you start your book with that. It was very helpful for me to get my mind right before I continued reading on. It was really good. And you also say, we've heard as leaders a lot of phrases like we before me, serving others, but you say leadership begins with you, but it's not about you. And to be honest, probably every leader listening is like, oh yeah, yes, amen. But come on, like, what does that really mean to live out in our leadership? How do we live that out for real?
Well, the reason I say leadership begins with you is to take a look at who you are. What's your purpose? What are you looking at? Who are you? What's important? What do you want people to say at your funeral about who you were and what you were about? And so it begins with really coming to understand yourself. And is there a moral base that you operate out of?
Mm,
And without that, you can head all over the place. And I don't think any organization or any team, or in fact, any family can go anywhere if you don't know who you are. People aren't going to be any better than the kind of behaviors they see from you. So it
mhm,
really takes an opportunity to look at yourself and who are you? And a lot of times we have images of ourselves that we're not Superman. We're not God's gift to the world. Just listen to me and we'll be better. It starts with a sense of humility and a sense of wanting to really listen, to
mm,
see, to come to grips with our strengths and come to grips with our weaknesses, a willingness to take feedback. All of those things, if we don't start out in leadership with who we are and what we're about, then there isn't going to be very much to speak about afterwards. Oh, it may be
mm.
for a while, but if
Yeah.
everything is about me, then there's a problem.
Yeah. We're here in like minute 2 of the podcast, and I feel like the wisdom you've just dropped is so profound and so often skipped over. They're like, oh, yeah, I know that's true, but we don't actually sit with it. We don't, grapple with it to really identify what are my motivations? What's the tilt of my heart behind everything that I'm doing? And, what are my strengths and my constraints and how do they play out in the workplace? We don't spend a lot of time reflecting on that. And that is
Yeah.
just like, to me, I always picture like a fountain of influence, and that's like the heart that's pumping the water up to then spill over into everything else. So I'm so glad you started with that. And I know for me, it just helped me go, yeah, take a minute. Take a minute
Well,
to
and
think about where I'm at.
I want to emphasize something else. This doesn't happen in a 24-hour session where I sit down on a piece of paper and write that down.
Hmm.
It's all part of our own personal journey. And as we grow, as we learn, as we people reflect back to us what they see or don't see, again asking ourselves, who are we? Can I stand in front of the mirror and be honest with myself? And it's a lifetime. And I look back in my own life, it's all a journey and it doesn't end
Hmm.
in 24 hours. I'm still working on things. And some people who know me 20 years ago say, this isn't what you were like 20 years ago. And my answer is guilty as charged. And so some it takes longer. But if you're always asking the question in a
Hmm.
constructive, healthy way,
Yeah.
as you go across your life, in college, out in the workplace, getting married, having kids, all of that, continuing to ask the question. And as you become more senior and have more senior leadership positions, you can be seduced by that. I
Yeah.
now have power. I have arrived. Everybody tells me how wonderful I am. I've got a nice office. Well, um, that's
Mm,
not what it's about. And can
yeah.
you stick to the basics? Otherwise, humility is no longer there. I'm just wonderful. Well, you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on some days you may be, but no, not always.
I always think about the emperor has new clothes every time, just becoming so arrogant in yourself that, you're caught without any clothes, but nobody wants to give you the real honest feedback so that you see the truth.
Well, I
Oh, so.
think we see today in a lot of places narcissism being lived out in all kinds of ways.
Mhm.
And nobody says
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And
Because
I
it,
think
it's it's your truth and your way. There's no like North Star compass absolute truth that helps us point forward. In a lot of people's there is. Let me back up and say, no, there is. We're just ignoring it. And
well, and
I
that's the issue of values versus virtues.
and that's what I want to get into because as I've been reading your book, I have started organizations. I've started a couple of organizations and helped a lot of businesses go through, vision, mission, defining their values. But after reading your book, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I've only played in the shallow end of the pool here. I've not gone deep. And your book is taking me deep to understand there is a difference between values and virtues. So, can you take us on that journey? Help us get into the deep end of the leadership pool and explain the difference between values and virtues so that we can go deeper.
Yeah, and it's a very important point. Let me give you a quick story. I was with a group of doctors a couple years ago, and they were going to write sort of a vision statement, and they wanted to talk about what is that about, and what are the key features of all of it. So they said, write down 5 or 6 values, and about 10 of them did. I mean, there were 10 there. And all of a sudden they say, okay, let's put them on the board. So then they put them on the board, these values. Some of them pretty interesting, others, wow. But in any case, and then they said, we'll vote to select the ones we like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based on the ones they chose that they liked, that they based everything else they were doing on those. I about fell out of my chair. So let me say at least what I think values are. Number one, they're an individual choice. You choose the ones you like or you think are important. And depending on your background, where you come from, they can be all over the map. But I'm just saying, individual choice is number one.
So
Number
true.
two, and it sort of goes along with it, it's very subjective. Subjective in the sense that, if I grew up on the south side of Chicago, they might be different than if I grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, or in Atlanta or Seattle, or
Mm-hmm.
in Arkansas or Iowa. But they're very subjective. And then the key point, they're malleable over time.
Oh, I got to
You
sit
can
with that one for a
change those
second.
values.
Yeah.
And you think back, as a teenager, I had these values. Man, they weren't so good and they didn't lead me in the best direction. So you graduate from college and you have another set of values. This is not meant to be negative, but when you graduate from college, I've got everything. The world is just waiting for me. And some version of that. Well,
Yeah.
then you go a little bit farther and maybe you meet somebody and decide down the road you want to get married. Well, values may have to change again. So they're malleable, which means
Mm-hmm.
that the ethical base you operate out of is a moving target
Yeah.
and not
Situational
locked
ethics
in
right
here.
there.
Exactly. But virtues, on the other hand, take a different uh, uh, direction. First of all, uh, where do they come from? Well, they're timeless and transcendent. They've been around since the beginning of time. They
Mm-hmm.
have been proven over a period of time. And basically, they come out either from the philosophers, Plato, etc., talks about various virtues, or they come out of various religious traditions, whether it's Islam, Hindu, Judaism, Christianity. There is a basis for those, and they've been around a long time and cross a lot of different cultures. Um, that's number one. So
Yeah.
they're timeless and transcendent. They don't change. Number two, um, it's important to recognize they're from outside ourselves. We don't choose them. They're already sort of the heart of the universe, the heart of where we are. And in the end, they provide an objective moral criteria for us. I'm not talking about rules that you follow, but serve as a core, a basis for who we are and what we're about. They provide guidelines for us too of what is ethical and what isn't. I think of a company now and then, because of Sarbanes-Oxley and so forth, you have to have a set of ethics. But
Mm-hmm.
but it ends when you meet, say, Sarbanes-Oxley or whatever. I'm talking about a set, and how many can you write legally to make this company ethical? It's
Yeah.
impossible because it's endless. But I would argue, as it is for the individual, that there are 5 virtues that you can see and feel as your core. They're timeless and transcendent, that you can see and experience the world and live in it.
Man, all right. So my next question is going to be, what are the five? Because I'm sitting here like salivating of like you're providing me structure. And I like the structure of I don't have to go out and figure it out on my own. Whenever you're constantly having to shift, it's exhausting. But whenever you're like, no, I can lean on these essential truths, these universal things that are transcendent, as you said. So, what are the five virtues?
Well, first of all, uh, they're always challenging in a lot of ways. Uh, in essence, the five are love, integrity, truth, excellence, relationships, catalyzed by courage. But I'll
Oh,
start from the
wow.
beginning.
Okay.
And this is not some kind of easy, let life go by, we'll see what happens. Quite the contrary. First one is love, and it's a commitment to serve others rather than self. It seeks to inspire others. You believe in your team, you believe in your family. You treat others with respect. You don't humiliate other people or organizations or an adversary. I had lunch with Hans Blix a number of years ago. He was the former foreign minister of Sweden and the director general of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. And I asked him, what key things have you learned in all the roles you have? He thought for a second and he said, you never humiliate another country.
Oh,
It will
that's good.
always come back to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then I'll finish off because these are equally important. You're willing to listen and ask questions. You're willing to say no and be tough and challenging when you must. There's a mix in this love, but it's
Mm-hmm.
genuine. I want to say one
Yes.
other word. Robin McNeil has written a number of books. He did the McNeil-Lehrer report for many years. He has since passed. And he talks about words. He's got a book about words, the things that he learned as he grew up and did his TV shows on PBS. But he makes one interesting comment. Words have weight.
Oh, yes.
And he said a lot of people will talk about things that there's no weight to them. There's a power in those words. And we need to learn where those weighty words are. And I think the five that we're talking about have some weight, meaning
Mm-hmm.
in the world we live, both yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So
Absolutely.
that's love. Integrity. Well, you say things that are important and you act accordingly. In other words, um, people can see in your behaviors that what you say is true. I mean, how many times have you seen people say X, Y, and Z and then watch them and there's no correlation between the two? And
Mm-hmm.
then you say, that isn't integrity. They can say all they want. A lot of people say a lot. Just watch them and you'll find out some rather interesting things. It's also got a lot, integrity is aligning with your personal life, your
Mm-hmm.
family life, and your professional life. It's not I do one
Absolutely.
thing at home, one thing outside myself or with my family. When I'm alone, I do something else. There's an integrity that goes across the line. You're
Mm-hmm.
willing to admit you're wrong. You're willing to take feedback.
So much of that is so good. And, with integrity, I think of, nobody likes a hypocrite. Nobody wants to work with or for a hypocrite, someone who says one thing and does another. Do as I say, not as I do. And you are so right that this is so universal of integrity, and it doesn't just happen in silos. It is across your life. It's across every area. And I'm so glad that you brought that up as just a great reminder for us to daily live that out, to have integrity in every area of our life. So
Uh,
good. Keep going. I'm just like my hands
okay,
are crossed. I'm just soaking
number
it up.
three, truth. It's able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, distinguish between fact and opinion, and know who I am and who I'm not. Sometimes when people tell us about things, we don't want to hear it or we don't
Mhm.
believe it. I'm going to believe what I want to believe about myself, but I'm telling you, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
Uh, you're willing to stand up for what is right. You're willing to say what's wrong, and you're honest.
And so many people are afraid to stand up in that. And I love you were talking earlier, it's taking that courage. But I know a lot of people just don't want to end up on the news as they run their organizations. It's just,
That's true.
cover it up. We just don't want to have bad publicity. We don't want to stand up and have this hard conversation. And these conversations are hard. So I love it to know the truth, seek the truth, ask for it, but also stand up for it. So good.
So we've had so far love,
Mhm.
integrity, truth. Next is excellence. I talk about leader, Liter. That's how I can remember it. Excellence. Now, excellence is a little bit different than what is often talked about. It's our willingness to daily learn and grow. It seeks to have a consistent life. It seeks to build a capacity in other people. It sets high standards. It holds people accountable
Mm.
and develops a positive and engaging workforce in the business world. So excellence isn't a destination, but something we're always working toward. When I would go to nuclear power plants and I was involved in assessing their performance in a team,
Mhm.
but you'd go to one and I could tell you within 15 minutes if this place was in the bottom half or the upper half, and I hadn't even gotten through the door. Because when you go into a nuclear power plant, they have all kinds of checks, scans, et cetera, et cetera. And some say it's easier to get into a prison than it is to a nuclear power plant. But
I
what I
believe it,
would
and I'm
just,
thankful for it.
oh, I am too. And it's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I experienced was when you go up to the place, is it well maintained? There's rubbish on
Mhm.
the ground, grass not cut. You go in, is it welcoming or not? There's usually a host. And it's interesting to listen to the host. The poor performing plants will say, Mr. Berg, we're glad that you and your team are here. We're wonderful. And they go list all the things that they're doing. It's been our best year ever. The bell goes off. Those people who I meet to say, how things going? Well, they're going pretty well for us. We had a good year last year, but we're working on 4 things. There's some
Mhm.
areas we can improve over here. There was that openness. And I said, now there's a place that's at least in the upper half. And
Yeah.
so I think this business of setting high standards, striving to get better, it's not an end point, but just a
Mhm.
passage. They may be a success, but excellence is still down the road.
Absolutely. And it's a daily discipline. I mean, it takes so much to do what it takes every day to make progress and not get comfortable. We like comfort, right? We're creatures of habit and comfort. And to be excellent, it's constantly stepping into that growth zone and working to grow better. But it takes a lot of being open and vulnerable to being honest like you were talking about, getting that feedback of, hey, we might have had a good year, but here's some things we got to work on. And I love that you're bringing that up. It's such an important conversation. So often we try to hide and put on the mask and the makeup to make us look so good in front of other people. Whenever everybody's got stuff to work on, nobody's perfect.
You're right.
Everybody.
On
Yeah.
the Blue Angels, the Navy flight demonstration team that
Yeah.
flies around the country, after every flight, the pilots sit down at a table and go over what happened during that particular flight. And it's not, oh, I did great, or Bill, you were, or Cheryl, you really did that particularly.
Mhm.
Each person will talk about where they could do better.
Man.
When I was late in that turn, or I didn't see this or that. I was too fast or too slow to respond. And that's the wrap up after they get done, and each takes ownership for where they are. There's a sense of accountability. And I think in
Mhm.
far too many places, there's not accountability. But accountability is done in love as opposed to you're messed up, you better fix it. How are we
Yeah.
going to get better? It's just part of the fabric that we live. And then the last part, we've got love, integrity, truth, excellence, and then relationships. And relationships is recognizing that leadership is about people and not about things. Is about caring about people. It provides constructive feedback. It focuses on people and not career. And people can remain approachable. So relationships are critical in setting an environment for people to operate where they feel that they are appreciated, they can learn, they can grow, they're going somewhere, their purpose is clear as to what they're trying to do. In so many places, that doesn't exist. And then I'll end those 5 with the word courage.
Love it.
And courage is something that is a habit that you have to learn along the way in little ways. Courage to say no, courage to speak up, courage to hold someone accountable, courage to give someone constructive feedback. And it may be just little bits and little pieces. And that's a start. But if you haven't practiced it every day, courage to live out the 5 virtues, when a very significant moment comes that somebody must step forward and say no, or we've got to go in a different direction, they can't do it. They know someone needs to say it, but they haven't exercised it. So all these virtues are something you live every day, and you use it as the core for the way you operate.
I love them so much. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, I'm sitting here having flashbacks in my own memory of all the different situations I've been in and sticky situations where it's like, do I step up? Especially if it's people with a higher position title, things than you or more authority than you. And I learned over my career, one, there's a Bible scripture that I had to cling to that helps me. I'm really big on mantras, things to help my thought process, like capture my thoughts and then go in the best direction. And it's 2 Timothy 1:7. It's God did not give us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and self-control, or sound mind, depending on which version you read. But I just clung to that. And then so as I was stepping into the hard situation and asking myself, do I speak up? I say that, and that helps my backbone go a little straighter. And then I'm like, you know what? I care too much not to speak up. And that just like prompted me forward, those 2 things, to speak in a kind, loving way, but also to speak up about important things that matter. And we have to. And I love that you take those 5 virtues and you wrap them up in courage. It takes courage to live your life in those ways: love, integrity, truth, excellence, relationship. I just thank you. I feel like I'm just sitting there like listening from this like wise Yoda. So thank you so much, Mr. Yoda.
Well, and I would say then that leadership begins with character. And character has a set of timeless and transcendent virtues. And thirdly, it's about courage and a willingness and seeing as significant you're there to serve other people and not yourself. Can I tell one other little story?
Oh, please do. Please do.
At the Naval Academy, at the end of every academic year, the men and women who will be joining the fleet or the Marine Corps go to special dinners for the group they're going to go with. If they're going to be on surface ships, the surface folks get together, or submarines, submarine people, or if the Marines, they get together. And so a couple of years ago, and there's always someone very senior that comes, a 3-star general, 4-star general, 3-star admiral, 4-star admiral, who come to sort of host it from that particular community. And in this this 3-star Marine Corps general was there, and he talked to the midshipmen who were soon to be in the Marine Corps. And he says this: okay, we have spent a lot of time in the last 4 years educating you and making sure you're the kind of person that we want in the Marine Corps and in the military, both academically, physically, morally, spiritually. We've worked on it. It's been about you. But I want to tell you this: when you stand up and raise your hand and say, I do, to be a Marine Corps officer, it's no longer about you. It's about someone else. And that the critical item for that is love. You need to love your people. And I don't care if you're a flag officer, a senior officer, or a first lieutenant like you. You love your people. That's in the Marine Corps.
Good. That is such a good story, and I never would have expected it from the Marine Corps.
Exactly. But if you want to know anything about love, talk to a Marine.
Wow. And I know there's like a brotherhood, right? I mean, that you can kind of get from movies and things that you've seen, but that explains it, that deep love of it. So in all of the things that I've been reading and everything that you've shared, the premise is if you live out virtuous leadership, that you're not only going to empower and lead better, but you're going to sustain this excellence. And can you explain to us the difference of how virtuous leadership can take us through that path and that journey of sustaining excellence versus just we took a win on this project and then new leader, boom, we take another dip. How does it sustain those wins in leadership?
Well, I look at it a little bit differently. I think we are all on a journey. Organizations are on a journey. Um, Families are on a journey. And so, how do you set a framework for the way we look at the world? And I think all of us, as we move forward, ever daily towards a sense of excellence, and that is um, a greater uh, adaptation of love, integrity, truth, and excellence. Every day we'll find places where it didn't happen. And we need to
Mhm.
ask ourselves, well, how did we do today? It's like standing in front of a mirror. How did you do today, Sig, in these items? And I must admit, every day there's something I could have done a lot better.
Mhm.
And I need to listen more. I need to ask more questions. Let other people talk. I mean, you can make up the whole list.
Yeah.
And so I think what makes this different, it's just the basis for us for a sense of personal wholeness, a sense of personal well-being. We're not weighed down by something we lied about yesterday or someone that we punched in the face the day before, um, getting drunk some night. Um,
Mhm.
you can fill it all out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go to bed worried every day, night, what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mhm.
Well, every day is a new day, a new opportunity. And so how it is the basis that we live our lives, and I believe it brings us a sense of well-being. The same thing can be said for a team. If they have work out of something very similar to those virtues and go about doing their business, there will be a greater sense of engagement, a greater sense of how do we accomplish what we're trying to do. And that, I think, brings better results and success in the marketplace, mission fulfillment. And there's pretty strong evidence that when you have this kind of engagement, people working together, their performance will exceed those of a group that doesn't have it. And so
Mhm.
it's a journey, it's an opportunity to grow. And I think it brings the best out of companies and organizations, but it gives us a life that we feel is worth living.
I love everything that you've explained, and I feel like I need to sit with this. This is an episode, guys, you're going to have to listen to twice as you think about those virtues and applying them because, will you explain to us real quick transcendence, what you mean by that? Because you were talking about how it's not just in silos, it's through everything. So some people may not understand that word or have heard that word before. So explain to us what you mean by that.
Yeah, transcendence means it transcends time. It's there since creation. It's not something that I chose yesterday, which has about
Hmm.
24 hours of being baked in me, but it's something that goes to the very beginning of creation, of life. It's like gravity, it's there,
Yeah.
and it's always there. And without some kind of moral compass, some kind of ethical base, then and it's based on, like I said, it's timeless, it transcends generations, it's a forever thing in
Hmm.
that what we know. And it's what makes the world really go around, not other things.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking about virtuous leadership and how I can apply this to my own life, and I'm like, you're building your leadership on something bigger than you as you focus on these virtues. And that is a beautiful thing. And it really helps you. For me personally, it's taken off a lot of stress. It's not about me. It's not, I don't have to carry it all myself. This is
Mhm.
bigger than me. And it just helps me honestly shed a lot of the stress that I think a lot of leaders, and I know I have felt in a lot of situations as we constantly deal with problems, conflicts, and constraints. It's bigger than that. And it helps me stay
It's like a
focused.
rock, and
Yes.
that you can, and there's a lot of things that flow from it. So it's not like these are the 10 things I've got to do, or I'm not against
Mm-hmm.
any of that. But I'm
Yeah.
saying it's a basis of building one's life, building an organization, building a team, building a society, building a world. You look at great sports teams,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about the engagement of people working together in a new kind of way. And um, and that's what I think this allows us to free us in a new kind of way.
I love it. I love everything you're mentioning. And I have one more question just because
Sure.
I think a lot of leaders feel this every day, all day. I was reading in this chapter, you were talking about the dysfunctions of an organization and of a team, and everybody's ears perk up of like, yes, my organization has a lot of dysfunctions, my team has a lot of dysfunctions, but you talk about how we can't look at just the thing. And I love your analogy here. You said, whenever you're analyzing wine, you don't just say the grape. It's the, forgive me, I don't speak French or whatever, but the terroir. It's all of it mixed in together. It's like a systems-based approach to organizational performance. It's so complex. So as we look at and work in what we would call, right? I have a dysfunctional organization. What advice can you give to us of how do we take this virtuous leadership and apply it to that dysfunction? I know it's such a big question and a complex problem,
No,
but
it's a tough question.
Mhm.
And I think individually, what are our behaviors? Someone says, how do you know when you see a real leader? You listen to them. Boy, there are a lot of people going around these days saying all kinds of things. But I say, look at their behaviors and you will find out who that person really is or what they're about. And
Mhm.
so, again, leadership begins with you, and how you operate and how you act. I'm not talking about being Mr. or Mrs. Good Shoes,
Mhm.
but I'm just saying, who are you? That's why your leadership begins with you.
Yeah.
And secondly, in an organization, I think it's what's your sphere of influence with the people that you work with in your organization. How do you develop that kind of relationship with them? And you listen to them and you ask questions and you demonstrate that behavior even within your sphere of influence. May not be the larger organization, but I think it starts within your sphere of influence.
Mhm.
And I think, and we begin looking at the world through the glasses of virtues. What
Mm.
what does that um, what does that look like?
Yeah. You know what I feel like talking about glasses of virtues? I feel like in reading your book and having talked with you just now, I feel like you've given me a new lens, a new prescription of lenses to look at life through. And again, and I mentioned this earlier, I feel like, everybody talks about values, how they're important. But my big aha in talking with you and reading is just that is, yes, that's good. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but it's still it's shallower than we can go. We can go so much deeper with these virtues. And for me, I know that's a journey I want to go on is how can I may have started at values, but how can I go even deeper to really analyze and apply those virtues in my leadership? So I thank you so much for, what you've sparked in me and the thoughts and the reflection that I'm having that I'm going to continue to have even after this podcast. It's been so good.
Good.
So let's kind of take everything you said, all the wisdom that you've shared, and think about the listeners out there. What are some key takeaways for our listeners that they can now take away from this episode and apply to their leadership?
Well, I think there's a couple things, and they're simple. You got to start somewhere. And I think taking a look at who you are and what you're about. But my hope is that people will read the book, and in so doing, uh, start to see the world through a virtue perspective.
Mhm.
In other words, take those on as being important, not only in my life, but look around and to see where
Yeah.
the virtues are alive or not. And what does that mean for what I can do as we move forward? What can I do with my own children? Are they
Mhm.
coming out with a set of virtues that they can operate out of? And so I think number one, as people read the book, and they can begin to talk and see the world from a virtue perspective, I think that can be helpful. And in other words, bring it into their lives. This is not a good one. Play with it. See what you see what you feel, and be honest with yourself.
So let me tell you what I'm thinking of. Again, and my listeners know, I think in pictures and movies and things like that. I feel like Neo in the Matrix, back from the early 2000s, where he learns about the Matrix for the first time and he's like, whoa, I'm seeing things from a different perspective. I see behind the way I've always operated. And then he starts making those moves where he's like slow motion, able to like defend himself. That's where I feel like I am. I'm having this aha moment of, whoa, virtues is like peeling back the front of the matrix so I can see behind it of what makes the world operate and how can I apply that to my life and make better moves, all those cool, moves that Neo did and all the fight scenes. It's coming. I feel it.
Bingo, you've got it.
And well, all right. So I like to ask a question that has everybody thinking the opposite. We've talked about all these amazing things.
I have one other quick item.
Oh, yeah.
I would ask that as people read the book, I believe that this is a journey. I would ask them, come and join me in this journey as we go down together. I don't want to be alone. The more people that can be a part of it, the better. But
That's
then I
right.
hope for greater well-being and a better world we live in. Next question.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I just want to know, you've mentioned all of these wonderful things. What's one poor decision you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, come on, don't do this. You're better than that. What is one poor decision?
Not listening. A lot of time leaders figure, I've got the answer. Oh, I've been there. I've done that myself. But I think it's really important for a leader to listen to his or her people and ask questions. And I think one will discover you may not have all the answers, or B, there's something going on I didn't even know about.
Yeah.
And together we might be able to resolve this. But without listening and taking feedback and asking questions, the kind of performance you expect won't happen.
Man, so good. Such good stuff. Absolutely. Listen, everybody. Listen. All right. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your work? Because it's excellent.
Well, there's two places. One, a new book, which will be out on the 14th of May at Amazon and other places, is called The Virtue Proposition. 5 virtues that will transform leadership, team performance, and you. And I try to make the case for the why virtues are important in the first half of the book, and then give some practical examples of how you can deal with it, either personally or in organizations or in teams, and they can be applied even to families. And so that's one place that I think is important. The second, really, I didn't want to start this, but a lot of people 11 and 12 years ago said, Sig, you need to not only write a book, but start an organization here in the US. And so about 11, 12 years ago, I started a group called the Severn Leadership Group. Severn is the river that goes by the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. And it's an organization that you mentioned in the very beginning, where people can become a part of our program, and we lead them through a way in small groups these days, sometimes residential, sometimes by Zoom, and there are mentors involved, so on and so forth. The first place for the book, you can go to www.virtueproposition.com. And for the second is www.severnleadership.org.
Awesome. And I will have those links in the show notes, everybody. So you can click on that and definitely go check them out and buy the book. I've just enjoyed it so much. I am right at the cusp of turning, like you said, from part 1 to part 2, where it's the why into the application. So it's really been eye-opening for me. Thank you so much for
Well, you know how to get a hold of me if you want to do some more talking. I'm more available.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. It's just been such a wonderful time learning from you.
It's been a great experience. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I hope there'll be a few more.
Absolutely. All right, guys, until next time, continue putting the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Romans chapter 13, verse 12. The night is gone, the day is at hand. So then let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.